as much as you want to focus on the other people in the room, your spouse, your partner, your child, you can't forget about yourself. You've got to take at least a little bit of time to make sure that you're okay. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. I know myself included that, I feel like I neglected my own well-being and happiness uh, during my time in the NICU. The inclination is to be a husband, to be a dad, to be the helper, to be, the rock. And you can't always be. You shouldn't be expected to be. You can't expect yourself to be.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast, Calling All Dads. I have absolutely loved this season. I have always had dads on every season of our podcast, but they have never been the main guest every single week, and I am loving it. I'm loving that dads are not monochromatic, just like NICU moms and just like NICU babies. No one story is the same. They are all uniquely beautiful and uniquely varied. And I'm really grateful that our dads are being so open and honest about things that they're feeling and fears that they had and things that they wish they had done and advice that they are giving. It is so inspirational. And I think that you'll find that to be the case today. My guest is Aaron Vasquez, and he is, at the time, he and his wife were married when they had their NICU baby. They have since divorced, and he talks a lot about what does it look like to co-parent and how did that change? What did that look like? And I think that there are so many things that he does in his professional life that really speak into how he loves his son and what life looks like now. But I'm so grateful that he shared just a few minutes with me so that you could be the beneficiary of his great wisdom. So my guest today is Aaron Vasquez. He's an Austin native and a highly accomplished chef with a 20-year career defined by culinary innovation and a passion for nourishing the next generation. After honing his skills in kitchens across the United States, Aaron returned to Central Texas to start his family in the city that shaped him. His commitment to children's nutrition is deeply personal, though. Aaron is the proud father of an 11-year-old son who was born prematurely at 29 weeks and spent 3 months in the NICU. As a matter of fact, he was in 2 different NICUs. We talk about that. This experience instilled in him a profound understanding of the critical role early and consistent nutrition plays in a child's health and development. Seeing his son happy, healthy, and thriving, Aaron is now driven to ensure that every child has access to the food that they need and that they deserve to succeed in the classroom and beyond. Aaron's expertise lies in developing large-scale, kid-friendly menus that meet strict nutritional standards without sacrificing flavor. He leverages his 2 decades of experience in diverse culinary environments, from fine dining to institutional catering, to create sustainable and compelling and appealing food programs. You're going to love this intersection between nutrition and family and love. So without further ado, let's get to it. Well, I'm super excited to have another dad in the room. So Aaron, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So you have a son who was born, I guess we would consider micro preemie young, 29 weeks when you were in the NICU with your son. Is that something, Aaron, that y'all expected in the NICU, like a NICU stay, or did that take you completely by surprise?
I mean, it wasn't totally surprising. My ex-wife, my son's mom, is a type 1 diabetic.
Okay.
And so we knew that there were likely to be complications. But she developed pre-eclampsia and was at an unrelated doctor's visit. And they said, wow, your blood pressure is really spiked. We are going to call an ambulance. And
Okay.
so,
So that was probably a little stressful.
yeah, they tried to induce, and then Augie was delivered by C-section a couple days later.
Wow. Okay, so as the dad, when you find that out, like what was your first thought, Aaron?
Panic.
Yeah,
There's it's totally helpless. There's nothing you can do but hope for the best. And it's doubly stressful when your partner is in the ICU on one floor and your baby's in the NICU on
yes.
another, uh, and trying to navigate that.
Did you feel torn between the 2 at that time?
I don't know. I don't think I
Okay.
did. I don't remember exactly what I was feeling then, but I knew that the most important part was our son,
Yeah,
and being there to listen to the doctors, and making sure that we had an understanding of what could happen, what was happening, and what the future might hold. And I knew she was going to be okay, so
yeah.
that helped.
Yeah. So speaking of like, okay, so now you're in the NICU with your son, you know that you're the one that speaks for him at that point because obviously he can't do it for himself. Did you feel prepared to be an advocate, prepared to be in that space, or were you like, this feels a little bit like a fish out of water?
Yeah, absolutely not. I had no idea what was going on. And the nurses were great. The doctors were great. Everybody, took their time explaining the process, and what the expectation was. Um, but it's not something that I knew anyone who had experienced anything like that.
Okay.
I don't have a medical background, so I had no idea um, what to expect. But they walked me through it, and I had another dad who had been there for a while who kind of said, "Hey, man, they keep the good chairs over here. Get here early and pull one over so you have somewhere to sit all day." I said, "Okay."
So did you meet other dads, Aaron, in the NICU that you felt like, okay, I feel like I've found some people who kind of see me, kind of understand what I'm going through as the dad?
Um, I mean, we met some people there. It was a bay unit,
Hmm.
and I think we all also valued our privacy, being that we didn't really have much of it. So there wasn't a ton of conversation that happened, um, and it was more of a friendly, bit of advice than any kind of mentorship at all.
Yeah, I can relate. We were initially in the Bay, and then we were in a private room. We were in 2 different NICUs, and I actually felt like we were able to connect with the parents better in the private rooms than we were in the Bay because I felt like, well, if we go back to the room, I can collect myself, get it together, and then if I wanted to connect with the parent, I was able to kinda go outside and make a purposeful, intentional connection, whereas in the Bay, I was like, because then you could have a 36-weeker, you could have a 25-weeker, a 32-weeker, of all varying different degrees of severity all in one room, and I was like, "This is a lot to take in," because not only seeing my situation, but I'm watching everybody else's unfold too.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. We were also in two different NICUs, and we ended up in our second stay in a private room. And there, it was. I wouldn't say that it was more communal, or a greater sense of community, but it felt easier to talk to people in the hallway than it did in the bay, because you're intimately familiar with their struggle, whether they want you to be or not.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Um, and so it's hard to know what to say in those moments. At least it was for me.
Yeah, you don't know them, you don't have a relationship with them, at least on
Right.
that level. So y'all were in the NICU, did I read this right? 3 months, correct?
Yes.
So, biggest fear at the beginning of the NICU stay, biggest fear at the end of the NICU stay for you as the dad?
I mean, biggest fear at the beginning of the NICU stay is that I was going to lose my child.
Mm.
Um, the biggest fear at the end of the stay, I mean, as I think with everyone who's in there for an extended period of time, is when do we get to leave? Um,
Yeah.
and then the day comes, and you realize how unprepared you are for it. Because, I've had professionals, helping me in every step, in every,
Yes.
regard up until that point, and then it's just us. And if something goes wrong, you know, there's no machine to ignore,
Right.
until you know not to. Um, and so it was scary not knowing. It was scary knowing I didn't know what I was doing still.
Oh, that's a good way to put that. Yeah, you at first it's you don't know what you don't know, and then you realize what you don't know, and the list keeps getting longer as you get
Right.
to the end of the stay, and you're like, do I need to sign a paper saying I'm qualified to leave here? Because this I feel very unqualified. In fact, I was more fearful at the end than I was at the beginning, only in retrospect when I can look back, obviously. But yeah, the leaving part, I think everybody thinks the hard part is the NICU part, but I think the hard part is after you leave the NICU. So when you guys, as you reflect back, Aaron, on your best days and your worst days in the NICU, maybe what was the hallmark of the best day? What was the hallmark of the worst day?
For me, I think, the best days were those landmark days. Um, when the blue light went away, the first time I could have the skin to skin, when they took off the CPAP, like all of those were amazing days because you could see the progress. You could see,
Yeah.
the forward momentum. There was positive movement. Um, and we were incredibly lucky. Our son came home. And, the worst days, the ones that still haunt me are other people's days
Yeah.
where, someone you don't know, but you feel like you've shared something with, loses a child right next to you. Um, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah, those are the gutting days when you sort of feel like you're not that you're in control, but that you know enough that you can manage what you have, and then you realize how precarious the balance is,
Yeah.
and that could easily have been you. And then there's guilt that comes with being I think I was unprepared for the survivor guilt that would follow, those days as well. So, Aaron, as you think back to ways in which you've grown as a dad, once you left the NICU, how did being a dad shift and change from those early days to then having the experience of a 3-month stay and then coming home? Like, what shifted for you as a dad as you began to parent your son?
I mean, the thing that really, really sticks out in my mind is the total lack of sleep because we were so paranoid. There wasn't a pulse ox that came home with us. We didn't have any of the equipment that would let us know if something went wrong. And, we were home for a couple days. And, my son had an apnea event, and that's when we went back to the other NICU. Um,
And
and so
he was how old at that point?
I mean, at that point, he was gestationally full term.
Okay, okay,
Um, but we'd been back, I think, 4 days at the house.
okay.
And I'd gone back to work, and then I got a call and said, "Hey, we're in the ambulance. Augie stopped breathing. You need to get to Dell Children's right now." So, okay, I'm on my way. Uh, and so when he came back, one of us was awake with him 24 hours a day, watching him, just in case. So we took shifts, and we were awake. Um, and then I think I was unprepared for him to be normal after that. I was always worried about the next thing happening or the possibility of something happening. And And I think that was really hard for me to get over. Um,
How did you function with that worry sitting with you?
how did I
Like in
function?
yeah, like in your job and your relationships, like how did that affect all those things? Because that's a lot to carry.
Um, I don't know. I just did, and it's not. That's a question I've never asked myself. It's not something I've ever really given any thought. Um, it became so normative at that point that it was just that's how life was.
Yeah.
Um, and we slowly but surely started to kind of reintegrate into normal life, if you will. I remember going to a restaurant for the first time with him, um, and it was pre-COVID, so there were a lot of things that I would have been worried about
Yep.
afterward that I wasn't worried about then. I probably would have had a little baby mask on him and, been a lot more, kind of protective than I was. Uh, but yeah, that return to life was tough.
I feel like that transition feels because there's not really a rubric, one, because every baby's reentry looks different and everybody's support systems look different and what they're dealing with, whether it's work or people that are there at the house with them. And so it feels very untethering, I guess would be maybe the best word, because you feel like you're just floating and you're like, so when does the person come and tell me how to do this? Because it
Right.
felt like we were making a lot of mistakes. I felt like I don't know if failing feels like the right word, but I certainly felt unqualified for
Absolutely.
I
There are
mean,
very few people who are qualified to do that, and,
yeah.
they're medically employed.
Yeah,
Um,
they have extra letters behind their name, and they're not the
right.
kind of letters that I have, so yeah. Um, so, Aaron, if you're thinking about another dad who maybe finds himself in a similar situation, maybe you had this baby with your wife in the hospital, and then years later you find yourself now divorced from that spouse, and I love the way that you share that you're co-parenting your son. How has that shifted knowing that you also have additional things, like you have medical things and you have all these other points of connection? How did you navigate the caring for him, but also co-parenting well? This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the App Store or Google Play, or visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent. Join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you.
We have always been he has always been our number one focus. Um, and so I think the co-parenting has come very naturally to both of us, in terms of splitting that up, and making sure that he is, well taken care of, and he has the support he needs. In other terms, we were so remarkably fortunate that after a few surgeries, he has no lingering effects of being a 29-weeker. He is a normal 11-year-old, and has been tracking, away from preemie, development since he was a year old. So, recurring medical issues related to his premature birth have never been an issue for us. Um, he had an inguinal hernia, which a lot of preemies
Mhm.
do. So that was taken care of. He had some vision problems that we've worked through, but nothing major, and nothing scary. Uh, so I think and we're as lucky as parents of a 29-week-old baby can be.
I like the way you say that. It's true. You also have this unique job outside of being a dad, is that you work in an industry that feeds people and particularly feeds them well. So I know that we talk a lot about we are what we consume. And certainly with our preemie, I was hyper fixated on how many calories he was getting, where those calories were coming from, more so than I feel badly for my other children because I was like, mom dialed it in. But with Luke, I finally plugged in and got serious about what we were feeding him, which meant that the rest of the family ate differently. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you do professionally because I know there's some overlap between your son's story and what you do professionally.
As a chef, I had these grand visions of never using baby food, and I was gonna make everything myself. But that's just I'm sure there are people out there who can manage that, who can make it happen. I'm just not one of those people. Um,
That's validating, by the way, to hear a chef say that. So thank you.
and then, he's a when he was young, he was extremely culinarily adventurous because we never presented anything as weird or gross. Like those are not words that are in, our vocabulary towards food. I mean, obviously there are things we like more than others and that kind of thing, but we had him eating curry at, a year and a half, 2 years old, and so it was natural and normal for him to try new things, to be excited about food. Um, and being that he started out so small, it was just over 2 pounds, um, which I know isn't technically micro, but he was
Pretty
extremely
small.
small.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
Uh, we let him eat whatever he wanted. Um, and it started just like everything starts, avocado and banana and some of the softer fruits, and let him gum at a peach, occasionally. And he still really, really loves fruit. That's kind of his healthy food.
Love
He's
it.
not a vegetable kid, as I'm sure most kids aren't. Um, but he does really love fruit. Unfortunately, his mom was not a milk producer, so he did have a lot of formula kind of in his diet. Um, and we kind of, I mean, we followed conventional wisdom, but we kind of broke him into, solid foods pretty quickly, as as if he were, a normal birth child. Uh, and that part was really exciting for me, given my background. Getting him to try this, that, and the other it was really fun.
Aaron, as you started to get further into your career, did you find that the NICU experience with your son sort of informed how you present food to kids who you know need better nutrition or who you want to have access to better nutrition? I'm curious how those worked and what the correlation is there.
I don't know if there's a NICU correlation, but I just think that being a father has really kind of changed that for me. Um, and here's the deal: I'm not judging anyone. I'm not perfect. I serve my son chicken nuggets and frozen pizza, but I try to temper that with as much fresh and non-processed foods as possible.
Yeah.
And one of the goals with my career, with my business, is that we try to teach from a young age. We try to educate kids who can then educate their parents that not everything has to come out of a bottle, not everything has to come out of a box or a can. Food is natural in its purest form. uh and even though I can't get my son to eat vegetables every day.
That's what we would
uh
call a miracle worker. So, Aaron, the fact that that you can't, like, I get it. I have tried, bribed, done all the things, and eventually they come around, but some kids are a harder case to crack than others, for sure.
and we talk about it in our scholastic division all the time. Positive peer pressure is a real thing.
Mhm.
So when we go to his friend's house for meals, or when he goes over to eat with someone else and they put vegetables on the table, and one of his friends, not his parent, but his friend says, "Hey, you got to try this. This is really good. I think you'll like it." He's more prone to do it there and decide he doesn't hate it, um, than somewhere else. And as much as I hate to admit it, some of the stuff he watches, he loves watching food YouTube, and anime stuff. And so because of some of the anime stuff, he said, "Can we go try ramen?" It's like, "Absolutely." And so
Love
it's
it.
got green onions and it's got mushrooms, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll try those. They're in ramen. They eat it in this show." And I said, "Oh, okay. Let's try that."
You're like, "If that's what it takes, that's good."
Hey, as long as the influence is coming from somewhere,
Yeah,
uh, and, as you know, as a parent, if it comes from one of us, it's not gonna be as meaningful as if it comes from, you know, a friend or a YouTuber or an anime character. Those
that is
are
so true. Yeah.
those are the influences, right?
Yes. Well, there's a point where you're cool and then you're not cool, and then hopefully you cycle back to being somewhat cool again. But they have to learn. I've found that sometimes you're right. Like their friends are great influences when when appropriate. They can be ones to sort of
Right.
give them the push to do something different. Um, so I think that there are a lot of maybe myths. I want to dive into about the food just a little bit. Maybe, like, parents have some myths about, like, how they mistakes that they're making or things that they could be doing differently to encourage their kids to eat differently. Aaron, what do you think some of the biggest concerns are that parents have, and, like, what are some things that have worked for y'all? I know you said it feels good to know that your child is also sometimes a hard sell, so I feel like you're qualified to answer that question.
Um, I think the difficulty comes, especially from people who have a NICU background, is that you really understand, the specialness of your child, and
Yeah.
I hasten to say miracle, but the work that went into getting them home. And so I, at least for myself, I have this desire to give and make happy. Um, and because, of what I do, uh, a lot of that is food. And, he's a child, and so he wants sweets. And, so I'm guilty of letting him indulge in things that, I think most parents probably are. Like, "You want a donut? Yeah, let's go get a donut." Um, but, what I have found works is, leading by example, because we'll go out to eat and I'll say, "I've never had that before. Let's try it." And I'll say, "I don't know. We've never had that before. Why would we try it?" I said, "Well, maybe it's good." And so a parent having the willingness to try new things, I think, will be reflected in a child having more of a willingness to try new things.
I like the way you said that, by the way. Just, "I haven't tried this before. Let's try it." I love
Let's
that.
try it.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we? Somebody likes it enough to put it on the menu.
That's right, that's right.
That probably means people are ordering it, which means it probably isn't gross. So let's give it a shot. And then, to me, making food appealing is as much about the freshness as it is about anything else. Because, frozen broccoli is homogeneous, and it looks different than fresh broccoli, which can be a little wonky and a little weird, but the color is there and it's appealing and it looks natural and it looks real. And, I think serving an unadulterated version of something rather than covering it in cheese or butter, which you put a little Parmesan on vegetables, kids will probably eat it. I know this.
Yes.
Um, but I think making it visually appealing, is something that people don't consider a lot. We have a phrase in cooking, which I'm sure you have heard, which is, "You eat with your eyes first," right?
Mhm.
And so if there's a mushy, overcooked vegetable on a kid's plate, they're probably not going to want it.
Right.
But if it's bright and vibrant, there's an innate piece of our brain that says, "Well, that looks good. Let's try that." it's it's colorful. It's obviously full of nutrients because it's colorful, and let's eat that. Um, and I 100% believe that taking the icky or gross or weird language out of a parent's vocabulary is going to help a kid not see foods that way as well.
That's good advice for all of us, not just for with our kids, but maybe even how we speak to ourselves about food that we see, and food that we prepare. I love that. So, Aaron, if you had to give advice, I know that there may be some dads listening or some moms listening who are like, man, the man in my life needs to hear this. And I wish that, I could say it this way. Like, is there something that you would tell another NICU dad who maybe has a similar story to yours, or maybe there's some Venn diagram overlaps? Like, what are some things that you wish that he had heard? Things that you wish that someone had pulled you aside and told you about your NICU experience and about what to expect?
I would say, as much as you want to focus on the other people in the room, your spouse, your partner, your child, you can't forget about yourself. You've got to take at least a little bit of time to make sure that you're okay. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. I know myself included, that I feel like I neglected my own well-being and happiness uh, during my time in the NICU. There's an hour that you're get kicked out on either side of shift changes, and use that time to go home and take a shower, or uh, go work out, or walk the stairs at the hospital. Do something specifically for yourself. And one of the things I did while I was in there, I read a lot of books. Um, one thing I did was I found some silly games on my phone that would keep my mind occupied and that were kind of fun. And it was just for me.
Yeah.
I'm not playing this with someone else. I'm just doing that for me. And I think that helped me a lot. Making sure I kept at least something, one thing that was just for me, because the inclination is to be a husband, to be a dad, to be the helper, to be, the rock. And you can't always be. You shouldn't be expected to be. You can't expect yourself to be. Um, so I would say find something for you.
That is really, really good advice. I wasn't expecting you to say that, and I'm so glad that you did because I think somebody needed to hear it. Aaron, thank you for the gift of telling your story, but we'll make sure that people have some links to what it is that you do professionally, but also we're just really grateful for you sharing a little bit about your story and hopes that it might help another dad.
I hope so.
In today's 2-minute take, I love asking the question at the end. That's been my hallmark of this particular season, is asking at the end of every interview, what advice do you have? What's something that you wish a dad had told you? And I was not prepared, but so grateful. I almost did like hand pumps in the air when Aaron was like, my best advice is don't forget to take care of you as the dad. I am so glad that a dad said that. I'm so glad that a dad reminded. So if you are a dad listening, please take Aaron's advice to heart, that in order to love your partner well, to love your children well, and really to love the entire community that may be supporting you through your NICU stay, you have to love yourself well. I thought he gave some really good, measurable, attainable, concrete ways that worked for him, things in which he took care of himself. And maybe it spurs you to say, maybe that one thing that he did, maybe that won't work for me, but I can think of something else that will. And he started the conversation of you thinking about how can you take care of your own mental health as you learn to love and support both your partner and your NICU baby in whatever way you're being called to. So I'm so grateful that Aaron said the thing that I was hoping that one of the dads would, and he totally nailed it. We have so many more episodes coming this season, so many great experiences, so much wisdom from dads. I hope you're loving it as much as I am. But make sure that you're listening to us either on YouTube or over here, whatever podcast platform you listen to. Give us a rating. Most importantly, though, what I want you to do is I want you to share our episode with a NICU dad that you know needs to hear it. And this might be just the episode that they need to hear. But don't go anywhere. We have more coming. Next time, you're going to hear a little bit about this.
And having gone through combat in 2 different areas and having gone through the NICU, I can tell you I'd much rather have gone through combat
Wow.
2, 3, 4 more times and have to deal with that. Everything you went through in there, like it's so difficult because it's your child, it's your family, it's your
Yeah.
partner. All of these things are very personal. Where in combat, you train with people, you work with them, but you also are taken into this whole completely different environment where, yes, like there's a lot of things on the line. There's your own life, there's a life of the people around you, but it's not the life of your family. And when you put that into the balance and the trauma of that and what you can and can't do in the very beginning, it's hard for a lot of us because there's nothing you can do as a parent in the very beginning to will yourself and get your child to be better all of a sudden.
Thanks, y'all, for listening. I have one quick ask. If you listened to today's episode and it helped you, inspired you, or encouraged you in any way, please subscribe, give us a rating, and then leave a review. It's how this podcast lands in the ears of other listeners, which means so much to podcasters like us. Our reach can be magnified because of you.